Welcome back, everybody. We want to get their latest on Hurricane Dorian as we continue to track its progress.
Yeah, we're monitoring the storm minute by minute. Meteorologist Brooks Tomlin, he's been keeping a close eye on this for days. How are we looking tonight, Brooks?
You know what, minute by minute, it hasn't done much in the last 30 to 36 hours. It's been over the same area of the northern Bahamas. Talking about Abaco, Grand Bahama Island. Of course, it made landfall yesterday morning around Elbow Key and Treasure Key, just to the east, just a hair east of the Abaco Islands. We now have hurricane warnings in effect for everywhere along the coast of central Florida, from St. Johns County all the way down to Flagler, coastal Volusia, Brevard, Indian River counties. And then the areas right here just to the west, we're seeing tropical storm warnings, and that includes Orlando, Sanford, Seminole County, Leesburg and Eustis and Lake County. And again, we're looking for the worst weather to be going as we go through the day tomorrow, especially tomorrow afternoon and evening, overnight into Wednesday morning to midday, and then in much improving conditions as we go through Wednesday afternoon. Guardian Live Weather Radar right now showing again those rain showers, the tropical downpours, squally weather continuing right now. As a tropical system comes near us, the atmosphere becomes more tropical, and therefore we're not looking at any thunderstorm risk as we go through the next 24 to 48 hours. But again, we will see some very gusty winds coming into play as we go through the next 24 to 48 hours in some of these squalls. Guardian Live Weather Radar tracking Hurricane Dorian right now. It's just sitting and once again and festering right along the north coast of Grand Bahama Island, and it will continue to do that more than likely for at least the next 8 to 12 hours. Not much movement is forecast until we hit later tonight or tomorrow morning. And you can see on the infrared satellite is just sitting right there over northern Bahama Island. Mentioned it a little while ago. There's a weather station on the far western end, a NOAA weather station on the far western end of Grand Bahama Island. We looked at that 3 years ago during Matthew. Looking at it again earlier today and through the afternoon and evening hours, it's roughly about 35 or 40 miles from the west to the west of the center. And what we're seeing is winds from 40 to 60 miles an hour, which again, in our hemisphere, the west side is generally the best side of the storm. We saw that with Matthew. We saw that with Floyd. We saw that with Hugo. And once again, that's more than likely what we're going to see as Dorian tracks off to the north and the west. Winds sustained now down to 140 miles an hour. And folks, anytime we say winds are down to 140 miles an hour, you know we were talking about a very strong storm. Yesterday at this time, 185 mile an hour winds, pressure up to 942 millibars. Now, again, the track, it was a blessing to see Jamie King and Christine Giannis this morning. Same thing with Glenn Richards this afternoon. The cone of uncertainty from the National Hurricane Center keeps shifting further and further east. And that is good news. Track as well, not much change, but it has shifted a little further east offshore. As we go through late tomorrow afternoon, the storm approaches us from the south and the east, passing offshore as we go through the overnight hours tomorrow into Wednesday morning. And right now, the consensus is that it should pass roughly 90 miles offshore. Some forecast guidance pushes it a little further offshore. Now, the further offshore that the center passes, the better the weather conditions that we will experience. So keep that in mind. We want this thing to push further and further offshore. By the time we get to Wednesday afternoon, the system Dorian is well off the coast of Jacksonville, and so our winds tomorrow into tomorrow night will be northeast and then north. By Wednesday morning to midday, they'll be screaming out of the west as Dorian passes by and high pressure fills in from back to the south and the west. And then Dorian tracks continues nearest North and South Carolina as we go through the end of the week. Now, let's talk about several of the threats. Number one, let's talk storm surge. We're talking about coastal Indian River counties, Brevard County, Volusia County into Flagler County, looking at the high risk of a storm surge, especially with those north and northeast winds continuing to pile the water up as we go through tomorrow evening. Once the winds start to switch out of the northwest, predominantly the storm surge risk is over, assuming assuming that the inlets, the water can get out of the inlets as well. And then as we go through the day on Wednesday, that will be a blessing. Let's talk winds right now. Again, as we go through tomorrow, winds really starting to increase in the afternoon. The strongest winds staying offshore, but again, 40, 50, 60 mile an hour wind gusts easily possible, especially in the coastal counties as we go through the event of Dorian. By 8:15 Wednesday evening, looking at much less wind coming through all of central Florida. And again, as we go through the day on Wednesday, then when the winds start to switch from the west, you'll start to see some clearing skies as well. Now, as Dorian has continued to shift its track a little to the east, same thing with the Hurricane Center, we're watching some of the rainfall totals lessen just a little bit. Not 100% bought into this. This is one computer forecast model, but again, it just shows if Dorian continues to move a little further east than what we've been forecasting lately, again, 80, 90, 100 miles offshore, we could be looking about 3 to 4 to 5 inches on the coast, a little bit less as we head inland. Last thing I'll leave you with, again, the picture of Dorian, the satellite picture. Keep the folks in the northern Bahamas in your thoughts and in your prayers as we go through this evening hour, because we've been watching this basic same setup for about the last 36 hours. Yesterday morning, made landfall on the right-hand side of your screen over towards Abaco, and now it's just sitting and spinning right on the northern edge of the Grand Bahama Island. We will keep you up to date with the latest on Hurricane Dorian all the way through the evening. For now, I'll send it back to you.
All righty, thank you, Brooks. Happening now, mandatory evacuations underway in Brevard County.
In fact, parts of the county urged to get out now while there is still time. The news station's Mike Magnoli reports.
Good afternoon, everybody. For the past couple of hours in the Melbourne area of Brevard County, we've had these on-again, off-again rain squalls. Feels like somebody's flipping a light switch on and off up there, and you get beat down with rain, and then it clears up again. Right now, we're at the Pineda Point Marina. Come with me this way. I want to show you a couple of things that have been happening here over the past few days. This boat didn't make it into the structure, so the owners came up with this. This is on industrial strength styrofoam blocks. I've never seen it before, but they say it will hold up during the storm. Now over here, the structure where most of the boats are, full house. This can sustain winds up to 120 miles per hour. And I've been talking with management here at the marina. It's a family business. They tell me that they've really struggled trying to figure out how to best prepare for this storm. That's because it's fluctuated so many times. There's been a lot of uncertainty, but they say they're confident they've got everything as secure as it can possibly be. And you're talking potential storm surge here in coastal Brevard County. You're talking hurricane force winds, possibly even with this track that they're saying is staying east, might not make landfall in Florida. You could still see some significant waves, some significant wind, and this whole area, this part of the marina, could potentially be very, very badly impacted by that. As you can see, no one around. So many people in Brevard County have heeded the warnings. They evacuated. That evacuation order went into effect on Sunday morning, and we've seen a lot of people doing that, getting out of Dodge. In Melbourne, I'm Mike Magnoli, Fox 35 News.
Red Cross volunteers from across the country are getting ready to help us here in Florida. This is video from Kansas City. Crews busy loading up gear and supplies to send our way. Kansas City's Red Cross office is sending 20 relief vehicles to Florida and other southeastern states.
And teams in Arizona also preparing. Cases of water, cots, and other items are packed and ready to be distributed. Even if those items are not needed in Florida, they can be used in other areas that may be affected. The news station is monitoring Hurricane Dorian.
We will have expanded coverage around the clock. After the break, we'll take you to the Bahamas, where some people are starting to assess the terrible damage there. We'll show you after the break.
Shining the light, wait. The car upside down? Wait, you all sure we can make this? Attempt to head out in the storm, to evacuate, to go by our neighbors, two-story home. Wait, the car moving? Yo, we gotta move the generator. Help me put the generator on the thing up.
We gotta go up on the attic. You actually with me?
Where the car is, right? Lost right now.
Just record the thing.
The windows are broken, and now water is coming through those big windows you see over there. Water is everywhere. The kitchen is destroyed. Water is up to basically the cabinets. Everything is just in ruins. All the wooden floors came up. It's a disaster. I shine in the light, wait.
Just a little glimpse of what winds over 180 miles an hour can do. Not only the wind damage, but the storm surge there on the islands in the northern Bahamas. More video now from the Bahamas showing the wrath of Dorian. Grand Bahama Island, cell phone video showing a massive storm surge with water as high as some windows in homes. According to local reports, the Grand Bahama International Airport in Freeport was under 5 feet of water earlier today. The news station monitoring Hurricane Dorian coming up. It's not just the beaches that are worried about this storm.
We're talking about some inland communities as well, fearing that all the rain can lead to flooding. So we'll talk about that and more as our special coverage of Hurricane Dorian continues. Stay with us. Storm still battering the Bahamas at this hour. Even with strong winds remaining, people outside clearing away debris. Just about every car and truck you see in this parking lot right here damaged or destroyed. It is now 8:30. Good evening once again. We have a lot more ahead as we do continue to monitor Hurricane Dorian.
Yeah, first thing we want to do is, of course, get an update on the track, what Dorians look like, and meteorologist Brooks Tomlin has the latest.
Not much of an update because, again, Dorian's still just sitting and spinning right to the north of Grand Bahama Island. Good evening, Steve and Danielle. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us on My 65. The latest from the National Hurricane Center, and look at that word, once again, stationary. It's been either stationary or it's been moving at, 1, 2, 3 miles an hour for about the last 30 hours. Here's Abaco. The eastern side of Abaco is where we have Treasure Key and Elbow Key. This is Grand Bahama Island. Freeport is right here. Again, these areas have just been absolutely battered in the last 36 hours from Hurricane Dorian. Yesterday, the winds 185. Now the wind's down to 140. I mean, think about it. It's a very strong Category 4 storm, and we're talking about winds being down 45 miles an hour from yesterday. Real quick, I mentioned this a couple of times already today. Same thing with Glenn. We're watching a weather station that's on the far western end of Grand Bahama Island. It's about 35 or 40 miles west of the center of Dorian. And the winds all afternoon into the evening hours have been between 40 and 60 miles an hour. Again, let me repeat that. The weather station is roughly 35 to 40 miles west of the center of Dorian, and the winds have been 40 to 60 miles an hour. So once again, the west side is the best side of a hurricane, especially in our hemisphere. And as Dorian continues to look like it's going to track up the east coast, we will be on the more favorable side, more than likely, unless something crazy occurs. And let's hope and pray that doesn't. Right now, high confidence that it will start to move to the north as we go through tomorrow morning. Again, overnight tonight into early tomorrow morning, not much movement with Dorian. Now, tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock, still supposed to be to the south and east of us. Note the wind down to 125 miles an hour. You know what moved off our coast 3 years ago with 125 mile an hour winds? Hurricane Matthew did on a very similar track. As a matter of fact, Dorian's track from the National Hurricane Center, the forecast track, is a little further east than Matthew's track was. Keep that in mind as we go through the next 48 hours. Wednesday, overnight, around 2 o'clock in the morning, Dorian tracks about 90 miles. That's the official forecast track, 90 miles east of us here in Central Florida. And by Wednesday afternoon, Dorian is east of Jacksonville, and so we're seeing the west winds coming into Central Florida, giving us fair weather. Dorian eventually will track up towards the Carolinas, may make a landfall in North or South Carolina, just too early to tell. Now, around here, once again, we have hurricane and tropical storm warnings through the duration, more than likely through Wednesday evening. So figure about 48 hours of these tropical storm warnings and hurricane warnings. Hurricane warnings along the coastal counties, Brevard, Coastal Volusia, Flagler, and then tropical storm warnings everywhere else in Central Florida, predominantly due to the amount of gusts we could be seeing and some of the squalls that have already been coming into Central Florida. Take a look at Guardian Live weather radar through the day. The northeast flow has been bringing in very tropical atmosphere. And once again, I mentioned it a few minutes ago. I hope you had a chance to see some of the rainbows outside today. It reminds me of a very tropical, lush atmosphere. That's what we're seeing. And with the tropical atmosphere, yeah, more rainbows, more downpours, more squally weather, not much in the risk of thunderstorms because the atmosphere is just too tropical or too warm. Current winds outside coming out of the north and the northeast, generally right now, between 15 and 25 miles an hour. These same winds look to continue through the overnight hours into tomorrow morning. Now, tomorrow morning through the midday hours, the winds will start to increase from southeast to northwest. Wind gusts so far today, the strongest wind gusts in some of these squalls, 40 miles an hour in Volusia County, Daytona Beach, 41 miles an hour wind gusts earlier today in Melbourne, Brevard County. So already seeing tropical storm force wind gusts. Now, here's the wind forecast as we go through the next 24 to 48 hours. And you see the winds increasing as we go through the day tomorrow. Strongest winds stay offshore. Easily could see tropical storm force winds with the possibility of hurricane force gusts right along the coast, Flagler, Volusia, and Brevard counties. And then by the time we get to late Wednesday, winds finally starting to subside, coming out of the west. And I'll leave you with this as we go through, well, goodness gracious, the first, 2 days of September now? The peak of hurricane season is still about a week away. And where we're looking, not just Hurricane Dorian, we're looking in the Gulf of Mexico. Possible development with this system in the far western Gulf of Mexico as it moves towards the Texas and Mexican border. And then, generally, we look to the east, way east of us, talking about just off the coast of Africa near the Cape Verde Islands, another area poised to develop. As a matter of fact, as it has a high risk of development in the next 4 to 5 days, we could be seeing a brand new tropical depression or another tropical storm developing in the Atlantic. We'll keep our eyes on Dorian and have the latest for you through the evening. For now, I'll send it back to you.
I appreciate you, Brooks. Thanks so much. 8:35. Brevard County is bracing for Dorian's worst impacts.
That's right. The news station's Lara Greenberg live tonight in Indy Atlantic. What are you seeing out there, Lara?
Hey guys, yeah, we're seeing a lot of wind right now out here. It hasn't rained in about 40 minutes or so, but we are seeing a lot of wind. We're feeling that wind, and we're still seeing those white caps on the ocean come up. Right now, we also have been seeing a lot of people on the beach, actually, even though this area is under mandatory evacuation. Anastasia here is one of the people that we've seen on the beach. You were taking some pictures. Tell me what brought you out here tonight.
I just wanted to come see it. I wanted to come see the storm surge, document it, maybe study it a little bit. I was just curious.
And you mentioned study it a little bit. You just moved here recently from Denver, and tell me why you moved here.
I moved here to study ocean engineering at Florida Institute of Technology.
So this is your perfect opportunity to get a good look at the ocean doing some crazy stuff, right?
Yes, totally.
So what do you think being out here? What's it like to see? I mean, I'm assuming you've never seen something like this before. You've never been on the beach before a hurricane is coming. What are your thoughts?
It's much stronger than I thought. I thought that the waves would be a little bit bigger, but you know, the wind is crazy, how dark it is, how many people are out here too is fascinating.
Yeah.
You did not think that there would be people out here right now.
When do you call it? When do you say, I think it's time to go in and hunker down?
Maybe a few more miles per hour of wind, maybe when it comes up. The waves come up a little bit higher, I mean. Yeah. I don't want to leave though.
Because this is interesting. Yeah. Something you don't typically get to see down here, right?
Totally.
Well, thank you, Anastasia, for talking to us. But yeah, we're seeing a lot of people on the beach. In fact, we thought that there were some little flashes of lightning, and it was actually just people's cameras taking pictures of the ocean. You can see how windy it is. I know it's tough to see in the dark just how big those white caps are. We're taking you a little bit closer so you can see the ocean right now, but it is rough out there right now, and we're still seeing a lot of people out here trying to get their own first-person view of the ocean and the atmosphere as we wait for Dorian to come. So we will continue to keep you guys posted and give you a look at the beach here at Indy Atlantic. One other thing that I do want to mention, Brevard County has issued, Melbourne has issued a flood advisory for parts of Brevard County from Vieira to Palm Bay. This was a little while ago. They said they've already seen about an inch of rain in some areas, so there is a flooding advisory. Just want to let people in Brevard County know that. And again, this area still under mandatory evacuation, so if you can find some place to go and stay safe, do that. Now is the time to do that as these winds, as you can see, continue to pick up, and we're waiting for the rain that we know is just going to come through and blast this area. For now, we will send it back to you live in Indy Atlantic. Lara Greenberg, back to you guys in the studio.
Lara, thanks for that update from Brevard. In Osceola County, downtown Kissimmee is no stranger to flooding, and with Dorian promising to bring a lot of rain to our area, the city is getting ready. The news station's Brian Scott reports.
Well, the tropical storm warning's already been posted for Osceola County, and you can see the water dripping from the rain. We're starting to get some of those wispy bands that last a few minutes and then kind of die down. We're seeing a lot of those throughout downtown Kissimmee here. You can see a lot of people getting prepared. Some of the businesses rather, boarding up. A lot of people putting out sandbags. You can see a good pile of them over there, just trying to keep water out at all. This area is fairly close to the big lake out here just off of downtown. I know that's been an area they've kind of watched in the past and during these hurricane and tropical storm events for flooding. We have been checking some of those areas, some of those historically flooded areas. A lot of people preparing, others not so much, holding off, waiting to see what happens, kind of what we're seeing everywhere. Some people out too, getting last minute action, getting some last minute supplies and last minute breather before this storm hits. Everyone just kind of waiting on pins and needles to see what happens out here for now. For now, we are in downtown Kissimmee. I'm Brian Scott, Fox 35 News.
The news station continues to monitor Hurricane Dorian.
We certainly do. We're going to take a break, but we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Port Canaveral now officially closed. Officials saying no ship, regardless of size or service, will be allowed to pass through the port. They add the drawbridges will close before predicted gale force winds, which means 39 miles an hour. It won't reopen until the severe weather is over.
And thousands of power crews are getting in place ahead of the storm. Duke Energy, OUC, and FP&L bringing in workers from around the country and even Canada to help restore power if it goes out. Once the storm passes, the power companies say you should report any outages and stay away from downed power lines.
Governor DeSantis suspending tolls for evacuees. State Road 528, State Road 417, and State Road 429 are included in the suspension, as well as the express lanes on I-95 and I-75 and the Turnpike.
If you need a place to evacuate to, Airbnb has the Open Homes program started last week. Airbnb hosts can now volunteer to open their homes for free to evacuees. Evacuees can look for homes in Georgia, Alabama, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Florida. Now, there is a map of all available homes on Airbnb's website.
Rosen Hotels and Resorts offering special discounted rates at all of their hotels. Their hotels booked through tomorrow, but they do have vacancies starting Wednesday. The cost, just $59 a night.
And Lynx buses will run their Labor Day schedules today, but then they're going to be shut down for the remainder of the storm. They will only provide life-sustaining trips like for dialysis treatment.
Sunrail also shutting down all this week. The service, of course, already scheduled to be closed today for Labor Day. Officials say it should be back up and running September 9th. Well, the news station continues to monitor Hurricane Dorian.
Yeah, that's right. An artist using the storm as his inspiration. We're going to show it to you when we come back.
Meteorologist Brooks Tomlin has been watching all that water for hours and hours. What is the latest on that storm, Brooks?
And seriously, it's weakening, and it's weakened since yesterday. I mean, that was just about as an atrocious of a situation as I've seen. But then this one is almost as bad. Good evening, everybody. Brooks Tomlin. Hope you had a good Labor Day. Seriously, hope you did. Looks like the weather conditions here will start to deteriorate as we go through the day tomorrow. Now, this is the eye of Dorian. Give you some perspective. Here's Abaco Island, Elbow Key, Treasure Key on the east side of Abaco, Grand Bahama Island. Again, this storm has been sitting over the northern Bahama Islands now for about the last 36 hours. It made landfall late yesterday morning on the east side of the Abaco Islands, and then it just did something like this. And then earlier today, it was on the south side of Grand Bahama Island. Now it's migrated to the north side, doing a little bit of a wobble, but we expect that motion to continue off to the north as we go through the next 8 to 12 hours, more than likely. Also, I mentioned this a few times. You could follow it as well. There's a NOAA buoy right on the western edge, or at least a NOAA weather site, right on the western edge of Grand Bahama Island. I'm talking about 35 or 40 miles west of the center of Hurricane Dorian. This buoy has been reporting winds all day between 40 and 60 miles an hour. So once again, even though the sustained winds in the eye wall of Dorian are now down to 140 miles an hour, you go just 40 miles to the west, 35 or 40 miles to the west, and the winds are between 40 and 60 miles an hour. That shows how fast the wind degrades in this storm and in a lot of hurricanes from the center outward, and that's what we're seeing right now. 140 mile an hour sustained winds in the eye wall, barometric pressure up. Yesterday it was around 910 millibars. Goodness gracious to Betsy. Now 942 millibars. Movement is stationary, but Glenn Richards was pointing this out earlier today. Number one, it has moved from around the southern edge of Grand Bahama to the northern edge right now. And number two, starting to see a lot of the outflow passing on to the north, and that's what's going to help steer it off to the north as we go through the next 8 to 12 hours. Forecast track has not changed since 5 o'clock, and wasn't that a nice treat to see the forecast track and the cone of uncertainty continue to shift a little further east? Here we go. Tomorrow afternoon, that's when the conditions here will start to go downhill. They'll deteriorate as we go through the daytime tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, if you have any last-minute plans or preparations, try to get them done early, because as we go through the afternoon hours, that's when I think we'll start to see the weather deteriorate. As we go through overnight tomorrow into Wednesday, 2 o'clock, real quick, the storm is east of us here in Brevard and Volusia counties, roughly about 90 miles out to sea. Also of note the wind speed, 125 miles an hour. Do you remember what other storm passed by off the coast about 3 years ago with 125 mile an hour winds? That was Hurricane Matthew. More on that in just about 30 seconds. As we go through Wednesday, the storm east of Jacksonville, Thursday, Friday, passes up near North and South Carolina. So let's compare recent hurricanes that passed by our coast with what could be Hurricane Dorian's path. Have that here. Hurricane Dorian, that's the red path right here. If you remember Matthew actually passed by a little further closer to the coast than where Dorian is projected to pass. So if you remember the weather conditions during Hurricane Matthew here 3 years ago, we will see either similar or perhaps slightly better weather conditions as Dorian passes by late tomorrow through the day on Wednesday. Hurricane Floyd was in 1999 and again passed a little further out to sea. Dorian could still go on a path similar to Floyd, and then Hurricane Hugo in 1989 was well out to sea. All three of those storms, again, we were on the best side, and that's the west side of the storm. If you remember, Hurricane Matthew, when it passed by, had sustained winds of 120 miles an hour, 125 miles an hour. These are the strongest sustained winds we had during Matthew. 53 in Palm Coast, 52 in Titusville, 47 in Sanford Seminole County, and 46 miles an hour is the strongest sustained wind with Matthew. Now, we had higher gusts, of course, those little squally gusts that came by, 72, 71, 70 mile an hour winds right along the coast, but those would be expected in the quick gusts. The strongest winds during Matthew were right over Cape Canaveral as the western edge of that eye wall clipped that. And then we had 48-mile-an-hour gusts in Leesburg, Lake County, 61-mile-an-hour gusts in Orlando. Again, not calling it exactly the same, but I do see a lot of similarities between Matthew and what could eventually happen with Dorian. And if Dorian tracks even further east than Matthew, we'll see less wind than that. Hurricane warnings in effect all the way through the event, which means probably through late Wednesday evening. The worst weather still on tap for as we go through late tomorrow afternoon into the evening and overnight hours Tuesday into Wednesday. Hurricane warnings for Flagler County, coastal Volusia into Brevard and Indian River counties. Tropical storm warnings in effect for the rest of central Florida, Seminole County, Lake County, Orange, Osceola, eastern Marion, Putnam, and of course inland Volusia County. Guardian live weather radar on the job right now, continuing to show that northeast flow coming in off of the Atlantic. The squalls that have come in earlier today, they'll continue in the overnight hours. They'll continue tomorrow as well. And then as we go through the afternoon hours tomorrow, as Dorian eventually starts to move in our general direction, but off the coast, well off the coast, we'll see more rain squalls coming into play. The good news with the rain squalls, it limits the chance of thunderstorms. A tropical atmosphere doesn't have the risk, doesn't have the cold air aloft necessary, so the risk for thunderstorms much less. But once again, we'll see the winds pick up, the squally weather pick up, and the weather deteriorate as we go through the day tomorrow. Rain accumulation, now this is a forecast model, and again, it's been dropping the rain just a little bit as we've gone through the late afternoon and evening hours due to the fact that Dorian may track further east than Matthew did. Looking 3 to 4 to 5 inches right along A1A, less rain possible as we go inland. And once again, I'm going to leave you with this because, folks, we're talking about Hurricane Dorian. You can easily see it, impressive presence right there on the satellite. But hurricane season, the peak of it is generally about a week away. And right now we're looking at 2 areas of disturbed weather for possible development. One in the western Gulf of Mexico. It's moving to the west towards the Texas and Mexico border. But here we tend to look to the east. National Hurricane Center is looking at this area of disturbed weather off the coast of Africa for possible tropical development in coming days. We'll send it back to you.
All right, Brooks, appreciate it. A Flagler County artist is getting artistic as we all await Hurricane Dorian. Stephen Belle painting a mural of Dorian on a boarded-up window at a gas station in Flagler Beach.
This is the only hurricane they want to see here in Flagler Beach, and hopefully it's the only one we do see, but I guess we're just going to kind of have to see what happens.
Belle says he plans on staying, waiting out Dorian at a friend's home in Flagler Beach. 8:55, the news station is monitoring Hurricane Dorian for you.
After the break, nearly the entire state, a lot of it preparing for a brush of some sort with Dorian. We've got to look at how other places are preparing.
And welcome back. We want to let you know Fort Lauderdale Airport is now closed due to Hurricane Dorian. Travelers should check in with their carriers for flight statuses.
The Florida National Guard definitely ready. The Guard preparing in the event residents need help.
The news station is, of course, monitoring every aspect of Hurricane Dorian for you.
That's right. We have crews throughout Central Florida staying there in tune to let you know the very latest. Our coverage continues at 10 o'clock on Fox 35.
We will see you then. Take care, everybody.